What's up, everybody? I'm David Hain. Welcome to episode number 284 of the A2D from Addict to Disciple podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, please like, subscribe, follow, and share the link with your friends. If you'd like to get our curriculum, you can get the paperback or ebook of From Ashes to Destiny on Amazon. Again, today's episode is number 284, and it's entitled Failure of Imagination. The term failure of imagination was first used by William Golding in his 1954 novel, Lord of the Flies. In this book, Golding says the biggest problem with society is that people cannot imagine alternatives to the way things are currently. And I'm making this episode to apply to a lot of us in recovery, where we get stuck and can't really see alternatives or imagine alternatives to the way out of our current situation in rehab, in a homeless shelter, in a halfway house, or still in our active addiction. Wherever we are, we just seem stuck and can't imagine any other alternatives. And the dictionary says the word imagine means to make a mental image, a picture that we have in our mind of something that isn't really present right now. And it says that this can be a powerful tool because it helps us explore new ideas. It allows us to think creatively, and it can lead to solving our problems. So I'd like to take those three aspects. If we're failing at imagination, how's that keeping us stuck where we're at in recovery and not moving forward? So the first way to use imagination as a tool is to explore new ideas. This puts us in a new mental space, a new head space where we got new thoughts and a fresh perspective on things. We're actually thinking outside the box we're in. And if you're thinking, well, yeah, then what do we do? Well, start listing these outside the box possibilities, the what if questions. What if this could happen? What if I could do that? What if I try this? And just keep going with that. Explore those new ideas. And that's a key aspect of how you can bring imagination into your recovery. And I'd like to give you three quotes. The first one's by Albert Einstein. And he said, logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. You got that? Are you stuck in your recovery, sort of going in a straight line from A to B, saying, if I just keep walking this path, I'll get to my destination? But it doesn't seem to have any life to it. Well, maybe it's time for imagination. It's time to get off that straight line and be able to realize that if you imagine, you can go anywhere, you can go everywhere, as Albert Einstein said. And maybe the initial destination that you had isn't the one that fits anymore. John Irving once quoted, "It's your lack of imagination that bores you." Sure, this is a big one for me because boredom is a big problem in recovery and a major cause of relapse. So what John Irving is saying, if you're stuck in boredom, hello, it's not your situation and circumstances that are causing it. It's your lack of imagination. Wow. The third quote is by Mark Twain. And he said, you can't depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus. And that really says to me, with no imagination, we tend to only see logical solutions clearly. We're just sort of saying, just tell me what the next step is I'm supposed to take. Tell me how to move forward, and I'll go do it. But the problem is, life isn't a straight line. And imagination allows us to explore new ideas which fit us better. We all have a lot in common, but we each have unique aspects to our recovery. And it takes different areas of emphasis. So the key is to not have a failure of imagination, but a rebirth of imagination. And that brings us into the second aspect of this tool of imagination, which is it births creativity. You see, we use the new ideas that we've come up with to create a safe space to test out these new ideas, to mentally play out a variety of scenarios, to bounce them off others who regularly think outside the box. to brainstorm with those people and eventually develop a new plan. And I like a few more quotes here. First one by Muhammad Ali, who said, "The man who has no imagination has no wings." So if you're trying to plan your way forward, would you rather have wings and be flying there, or plodding along step by step, slowly, in what would seem like a boring walk, probably? And Pablo Picasso, the artist, said, "Everything you can imagine is real." You got that? He's suggesting that all creation starts as visions. And if you find yourself lacking vision, this one's for you. It's saying if you can imagine it, that's the first key creative step to making it real, to making it happen. And Jenny Wirtz said in To Ride Hell's Chasm, "It's tragic how the lack of imagination so often shapes our defeat." You got that? If you're not adding any creativity, if you're not adding any imagination to your recovery, it often leads to defeat and shapes your defeat. It's sort of like you're predetermining defeat rather than success. The third aspect, again, for imagination is that it can solve problems. And this is not by focusing on fixing the past, but by moving forward and leaving the past in the past. You see, with these new ideas and with the creativity going, we've got new thoughts and new visions. And so we're looking for a new path forward, perhaps a new career or occupation, a new lifestyle, a new special interest or new hobby, or a new creative expression of your thoughts and ideas that always seem to be just sort of in a cobweb in your brain. This can birth a new creative way to express those things. And again, some quotes for this aspect. Lewis Carroll said, "Imagination is the only weapon in the war of reality." You got that? Imagination is the only weapon in the war with reality. And if I rephrase that, you could say imagination is the weapon or the only weapon in the war with recovery, because we can get to a point where we're constantly at war with reality in our recovery, and we need our imagination to jump in there and give us fresh vision and fresh juice, so to speak. Stephen Covey said, "Live out of your imagination, not your history." And as I said just a minute or two ago, we can't be fixing the past and focusing on the past, but we need to be moving forward. And so we can't live out of our history. We need to live out of our imagination. And I like the quote by Van Chow, who said in The White Man and the Pachinko Girl, "Between the new happy hymn and the old depressing hymn, there stood in the way only his lack of imagination." Can you hear that for you? Perhaps the only thing standing in your way between the old depressing guy you've been living with for years, so to speak, inside yourself, the only thing standing in the way of you finding the new happy self is a lack of imagination. So if you feel stuck, imagination can be your way out and your way forward. And I'd like to close with just a short quote and then a song. So the short quote is by Terence McKenna. And this quote says, "The imagination is the golden pathway to everywhere." So if you're really looking for that yellow brick road, if you're looking for golden opportunities, start imagining and you'll see the golden pathway, the yellow brick road sort of appear before you. And finally, I'd like to give you a quote from the lyrics of What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. He recorded this in 1967, but this was the decade of the civil rights movement in the States, and ABC Records refused to promote the song. So in the US, it only sold less than 1,000 copies. But it was a major success in the UK, reaching #1 on the singles chart, and was the best-selling single record in 1968 in the UK. It was only 17 years after Louis Armstrong passed that this song was part of the movie Good Morning Vietnam, and it had a new popularity. It rose to number 32 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts. And another 11 years after that, Louis Armstrong's recording of What a Wonderful World was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Listen to just one verse of this and think of how the imagination that he sang, the vision that he had, the picture in his mind was not the reality he was living in, but the reality he imagined. And I'll quote, "The colors of the rainbow so pretty in the sky are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, 'How do you do?' They're really saying, 'I love you.' And I think to myself, what a wonderful world." Thanks for listening to this episode of the A to D From Addict to Disciple podcast. If you were saying that's me as you listened, then it's time now to reach out and join a group. You can message me on the link in this podcast or by email at davidfroma2d@gmail.com, or go to my website, www.froma2d.org, and click on the contact page. Keep listening to future podcast episodes, and as always, stay safe and stay resilient.